Good morning, everybody. John Sfiocla here for GAI Insights and our Gen AI news briefing. We've got a ton of news this morning. There's a developer conference out in Santa Clara, San Jose, and lots of stuff from Nvidia. Then we've got some interesting briefings from Apple and Microsoft in terms of their integration with new kinds of AI services. And we had a fantastic meeting over at Harvard Business School last night with MIT and HBS talking about new innovative companies. So a lot going on here today. And we're being sponsored, of course, by customgpt.ai. Great way to get started on your modeling and services capabilities in your organization. And I'd like to start off with Ankush. Take us to the first article, if you would.
Sure.
Ankush, you there?
Thanks, John. Just bringing up my screen, John.
Very good.
Yes. So the first one that we have for today is from Nvidia. So Nvidia has revealed its new GPU called Blackwell B200, and it's been touted as the world's most powerful chip for AI.
All right.
Yep. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I was going to ask Tim to take us through that and a couple other of the NVIDIA announcements from their developer conference. Go ahead, Tim.
Yep. So it is by far the most powerful, I think. We've seen some other niche chip makers claim this, but this one is, following the extension of Moore's law, we might call it, because it's, again, another almost order of magnitude, it looks like, more powerful than the prior versions. And so it's going to add, reduce training time and in particular, reduce energy consumption. It's quite a bit less, what's the word I'm looking for? Draining of power. And so it can do the same kind of training, it looks like, in about a quarter of the power from prior chips and much faster. So that's quite a combination. What we come used to expecting, but it's still at this level, to channel my inner Paul, breathtaking.
Yeah, no,
so I would say this is at least important and maybe essential. It's not going to affect like what any particular AI leader necessarily does tomorrow, but it's pretty important to be aware of how quickly things are moving and how powerful it is. I guess the one thing that might make it important and maybe even essential is that this makes it, and the following announcement, make it much more possible to build your own model.
Yeah, I was amazed. Other reactions?
I want to know how much it costs.
Yeah, I didn't see. Did anybody get a price?
Pricing, I'm sure it's going to be a ton of money. I mean, the other chips are tens of thousands, so I would imagine tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands.
Yeah, I don't know what the H100 is going for at the moment. It had gotten as high as, I believe, 40,000 or something like that.
Yep.
But it may have gone back a bit, but yeah, it's probably pretty pricey.
All I can ask is, what comes after trillion-dollar company?
Yeah,
like that next level, because they're going to get there at this rate, man. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, I'm just highlighting the breathtaking. I mean, 200 billion transistors.
Right.
Yep, and it's the same size. I did work on the original Macintosh back in the day, and the original Mac had a 68,000 processor, which was, if anything, larger than this and hot enough to fry an egg on. And, ran 6 megabits, I think, something like, several orders of magnitude less powerful.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing that's amazing here is the improvement in networking, right? In the previous architecture, yes, you're talking about 40% compute time and 60%, communication time. And now they've gotten that way down. And as you said, Tim, I think the number was from over 70 megawatts of power to train a large model down to 13. So, I mean, this is, it's a significant power.
Maybe less.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I think the architectural implication, and the other thing is it's so modular, right? You do this and you look at the other announcements from NVIDIA that we're going to go through. This is about, you can buy the AI capability literally in a box, right? and then you can have it either be as a virtual machine or microservices to
Yep.
just enhance your AI stack. And
Yep.
it's just, yeah.
Similar to the approach taken with PCs when they sort of deconstructed and motherboards became the rule of the day. And that's what you get in racks today is you really get a motherboard that is some sort of, at these point, they're servers more than PCs, but in the old days they were PCs.
Yeah, it's just
But yeah, the manufacturers like to put these modular things together. It makes it easier for the Azures and the Google Computes and the AWSs of the world to just plug them right in.
Yeah, and actually, so we're going to call this essential. All right, let's do this essential. And Akash, we go to the next one about NVIDIA. We're going to try to consider all three together because of the developer conference. So here we have Groot, one of my favorite, characters from the Marvel universe, Guardians of the Galaxy. My daughter Kathleen loves Groot. And then Tim, you want to keep going on this in terms of
so Groot is a platform that is both hardware and software, particularly tuned to humanoid robotics. So foundation models and hardware support for arm dexterity, motion dexterity, and vision. So the critical things that put together the pieces of robotics that have been around for a while. We've had machine vision and we've had robotic arms for quite a long time, but these are more dexterous and integrated. And so this platform aims to make it much simpler for developers to make these robots go.
Yeah, and let's get Akash, let's get the next one up as well, and then we can discuss all three together.
Yep, and this one I think is at least important again. The only reason I don't go right to essential is because this is infrastructure that will be hidden from most end users. So Microsoft will be very interested in this. Some developers may be interested, but this is a deployment model to make it easier. And one of the big things they've done is for people who turn their propellers very fast on their head, they've put the foundation models and capabilities into a container. Containers are a widely used deployment capability across every cloud platform in the world. And so this is important, very important, because the deployment and operation of these models is going to be a critical factor to scale. It's just not clear it will be directly visible if you're an end customer. It will help Azure a lot, but it may not help you if you're an Azure. It may not be directly visible to you if you're an Azure customer, but you can also use it directly. So it's quite important.
Yeah, I mean, and, when you look across these three announcements together, so this unbelievable new chip capacity, lower power, the ability to help humanoid robots, especially around dexterity, movement, and learning. And then you've got this kind of containerized set of microservices and virtual machines already compatible with, as you said, a large container model, Kubernetes, and so forth. Being provided by the large providers. I mean, this seems to me like a huge step up in AI capability altogether, and just breathtaking. We gotta come up with a new word, but whatever. Gotta check with a robot what's better than breathtaking, but a breathtaking about amount of capability.
Yeah, you have to give. You like to congratulate Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, on his strategy. To me, this is a brilliant strategy because Jensen Huang is realizing, the CEO of Nvidia, that the chip makers are coming at him, and just getting faster chips is not going to be enough to sustain advantage. And so he's moving up the chain and making it easier and easier for people to package these things up and deploy them.
Yeah, and you have to give Huang credit for basically the risk he took, right? Like several years ago when he really just shifted toward AI, and people were kind of thinking like, okay, at that point you didn't expect necessarily where things were going so quickly, and it was a risky bet at the time, and it's totally paid off. And I feel like these moves, people when you look at it from a stock buying perspective, are kind of thinking, well, they can't maintain this, their chips are going to have more competition soon. But like now these additional moves that they're making into other areas, to me, just kind of prove that there's no limit. As you said, Adam, it's like what comes after a couple of trillion. They're already more valuable than most countries by GDP or smaller countries. It's just kind of amazing.
Just to emphasize, Tim, when Tim says like this is foundational, so this architecture supports models from Nvidia, A121, Adept, Cohere, Getty Images, Shutterstock, as well as open models from Google, Hugging Face, Meta, Microsoft, Mistral, and Stability. And they're already working with Amazon, Google, and Microsoft to make these microservices available on their clouds. Like this is everywhere.
The only missing name, which was the big one, was OpenAI.
But they'll get that through Microsoft.
They'll get it through That's true. They'll get it through Microsoft.
Well, and also doesn't OpenAI, they're like required to use Microsoft, aren't they, from their deal?
Well, it's the only one they can afford, I'm sure.
Yeah, that too, right?
Because that's what the deal mostly is compute.
Then it just comes back to begging the question for our target audience: is this essential or important, right?
Well, I'm going to give it an essential. I think they can dive into these three. They can dive into these are
three for sure.
Yeah. So let's put them all as essential. And just to put a note on it, Nvidia's current market cap is about 2.2 trillion, and that, by the way, is the equivalent of Italy or Brazil, which is like the 7th or 8th largest economy in the world. So when you said smaller economies, David, it's like, yeah, that's the smaller as 9th in the world.
Than the U.S.
3 countries. Yeah. All right, Akash, next.
Okay, the next one is Microsoft and Nvidia. So after the announcements from Nvidia around the new chipset, Microsoft came up with its own announcements on how it is collaborating with Nvidia on all these new things.
All righty. David, you want to take a crack at this one?
Sure. So there's a bunch of stuff that's like simply cloud related that I'll kind of skip, but for the most part, this is what we just were talking about, right? It's kind of an announcement that Microsoft is like first in line for the Blackwell chipset, and they're offering microservices on top of it in conjunction with Nvidia. So it's really just kind of showing what we just talked about, and that like it's already in action with Microsoft, and Microsoft's kind of jumping in to say, hey, guess what? We're on the leading edge again. So I'd put it important just because we put the others as essential. I wouldn't say it's necessarily essential because, this is all kind of like part of the other announcements.
I'm on the other side, David. This is optional to me. I mean, the user conferences right now for NVIDIA, they're just saying we're at the party. It'd be stunning if they didn't have a press release that said this.
Yeah, it's better for NVIDIA in many ways than Microsoft, because it's signaling that they're all in on NVIDIA despite their talking about having their own chips. They're not moving away from NVIDIA anytime in the near future.
All righty. Well, let's give this guy an optional. So we got 3 essentials and an optional. Akash, what's next?
Next one is from Roblox. So Roblox has introduced a new AI-powered tool to boost 3D content creation.
All right, Adam, can you give us a...
Yeah, look, so just in brief, they've added 2 new capabilities to their developer tool, which is an avatar auto setup and a texture generator, which is useful. It's going to speed the development a little bit. The news itself is probably optional, but for anyone who's not paying attention to Roblox, I wanted to just share a little bit. So we have major brands like Gucci, Nike, Netflix, Walmart, and Spotify all using the platform to try and really engage and target the Gen Z audience. Roblox has over 70 million daily active users who spend on average almost 3 hours on the platform, and 40% of those users are under the age of 13. So that's 30 plus million under 13-year-olds spending 3 hours a day on the platform. For some of these companies, that's big business to try and target that audience. This specific news is I would consider optional in terms of incremental changes, and really nothing that we don't see capability-wise through some other tools already. But Roblox is definitely one to continue to pay attention to. In the business space, it's not just a way to play games.
That is just amazing. 250 million hours a day, right?
Yeah, Roblox is a big platform. People, it's under the radar, but it's a huge platform. And again, for designers and people interested in Roblox, this is essential. But I agree, for everybody else, it's just yet another indication of how fast things are moving. The ability, what David showed us last night with Photoshop and its ability to do smart lasso and things like that. So these ability to make it much easier to manipulate images. And this is now 3D images, avatars, put textures on them. These are the basics of making stuff. And they're now much faster and easier. So yeah, for most of our audience, they're not making avatars and textures. But for those that are either brands using this platform or in the platform itself, this is essential.
Yeah, it's amazing when you think about, I mean, it's almost like from one end, you have the kids living in a virtual environment and manipulating that virtual environment. And the other end, you've got, an environment that's going to be more and more plastic and manipulable. So you're going to be able to come out of the video game into the robot that's in, whatever we're going to call it in real life, 3D space, whatever, and then back again. You know what I mean? So it's just, between marketplace, market space. I mean, it's just going back and forth. And these kids are going to be, well-versed in how to manipulate that and operate in that environment.
Yeah, I wish I was a kid again when I see these. Like, I was a gamer. I had one of the early Ataris in like the early 80s and upgraded every year and played it into my early 30s, really, until I just got way too busy to to do any of this. But man, I would have had a great time with that. And I think it's just really cool. And I think it is a great learning tool. I mean, I know we have worries about screen time, but I even myself playing primitive video games, I feel like you do acquire some skills, especially if you start playing some of the games that require, some more thinking, like the role playing and such. And it's just really cool to see.
Yeah, it's smart for those brands to be in there too, in terms of building, brand loyalty to the next generation. All right, so we're going to put this as optional because it's not a big technological thing, but an interesting subtext here about the importance of Roblox and how invisible it is to a lot of folks in our audience. All right. Next, Ankash.
Okay, next one is from Apple.
All right.
So seems like Apple has given up on developing its own large language model, and it might include now Google or OpenAI's capabilities behind in its iPhone.
All right, Paul, you're a veteran of the software wars here. What do you think?
I think obviously lots of gossip of and speculation what Apple's going to do. I certainly and others were expecting they would come up with their own model. It's a bit breathtaking. They are clearly getting focused. They canceled their initiative to go after have an offering in the car market. Now they're looking at partnering with one of the major players out there. So sounds like they're getting focused and may not be as dramatic as we think, but I think right now it's an optional thing because we don't have any clarity in any of these.
And David, you want to just take us through your cartoon?
I just last night at the Learning Lab, I showed how I make my comics, and so we all kind of embarked on creating a simple 2-frame comic together. So I asked everybody about, recent AI news that we could spoof, and this was Tim's idea. Just amazing. I mean, PR for Apple, I want to hire every single one of you because you just continue to keep this company in the news saying, we're going to do something. We're going to do something. So we created this little spoof on that where we had Tim on stage just kind of talking about Gen AI generically, which is all they've done so far. And someone asked a question about their products and Siri in her, typical uselessness. Although, as Adam noted, she's got some improvements that have come. She kind of spills the beans and says, like, Tim, you told me to let you know when we hear that you have an emergency when we hear the word Gen AI projects. Emergency, because like he's got no answer for it. So I think, by the way, the lab was great last night, fun. And Tim, thank you for participating and helping to move that along.
Sure.
So,
Adam, I think, look, it's all speculation right now. Apple does have their own model. They've been doing lots of research. I'm sure they would prefer to use their own model, but if you're Apple, you've got to have all the bases covered. So you've got to be talking to Google and to OpenAI because you got more cash than most countries. And if you can solve the problem with cash and you can't solve it with your own developers, then you do it.
I do think it's interesting the note that, I mean, we're almost a year and a half into the ChatGPT explosion, and Amazon's been flat-footed. Google's clearly been flat-footed, and Amazon or Apple is TBD, but certainly all three of the majors are non-leading players yet. So I think it just shows you how nimble it is to be a smaller 2,000-person company and how fast this is moving.
And well, Dr. Castro is a dissenting voice there. He thinks they should integrate and then they'll have their own models. Adam, I think you're in a
yeah. I was going to speak to what Harvey was saying there as well. I think he's on the right track here. Right, they're really well positioned on device that they can be multi-model. Right, they can have some small language model that's sitting on device that's making intelligent decisions about whether they should be using Gemini or OpenAI on the back end. I think they don't need to necessarily go after the big play. And certainly in the short term, while they're developing things, this is a smart move to keep them in the game and to keep their technology relevant on device and still make Siri a useful player in this battle for people's attention.
All right. So the question of where the control point is, competitively is still up in the air, whether it's, on device or the meta model or the model itself. But in terms of this particular article,
optional.
We're going to leave it as an optional and hold open the question as to where the market power lies. All right. Akash, next.
Okay. The last one we have is from Ethan Malik. He discusses the three new top chatbots that we have based on LLMs, GPT-4, Anthropic's Claude 3 Opus, and Google's Gemini Advanced.
Yes. Paul, I was wondering, could you start us off on this?
John, I feel like I'm at HBS. I'm going to have to pass. I'm taking a text from my wife.
Oh, so God, you're going to pass the opening. All right. Volunteer? Do I have
yeah. Go ahead, David.
Yeah. So look, I love Ethan Malik's stuff. I subscribe to his newsletter. In this one, he compares Claude, Gemini, and GPT-4 and talks about some of the similarities and differences. And when you might want to use one or the other. Usually I find his posts pretty informative. This one to me was not really that informative for me. I think it says a lot of things that we know already, that Claude is much more conversational and kind of scary because you really feel like you're talking to a human, and he ponders whether that's an emergent capability or whether it's actually trained that way, which I bet says probably the latter, because that's one of the things that Anthropic kind of touts about this model. He gives Gemini some kudos in here for the context window and kind of notes how much you're able to do with video and large text because of it. And he poses something interesting that maybe RAG at some point is going to be kind of going by the wayside as context windows grows. Also notes that even when you use RAG, there's still hallucinations. So kind of a lot of recycled material, but again, still recommend following Ethan. He's really a smart guy and has some interesting things to say, but I would call this one optional.
Okay, so we have an optional. And you're going to make the case for important, Adam?
I was on the fence. I think not everyone is necessarily totally up to speed, and I think for the length of this article, he does a really good job of bringing it all together, painting a clear picture of the landscape, who the leaders are, talks about agents, talks about RAG. It's fairly comprehensive. It might be regurgitating a lot of things we already know, but when I think out about who's out there trying to get up to speed, and they're trying to understand what the state of affairs are. I mean, a lot of stuff he's talking about in there didn't exist a month or 2 months ago, right? So I could see a case for important in that if you aren't quite up to speed on all of this, this is a really good read in your spare time to try and get you up to speed quickly. But
Yep.
I was on the fence with optional.
Yeah, for our audience, I felt like an AI leader probably knows all of this, right? If you're more of a layman and you're not keeping up with the news of obviously like we are keeping up with it every day, it's part of our job. I think it's useful for that audience. For the AI leader, I feel like they could kind of take it or leave it when they're
let's say if our AI leader isn't across this, then it's essential.
Yeah, it's true. Yes.
I'm going to lead more to our important due to a fact. We just one of our customers just did a survey before we're going to do a learning lab for them, and turns out that over 70% of the folks in the AI ML team use generative models less than 2 hours a week. So I'm not so sure your assumption that they're up to speed on this is valid, at least at that client. So let's give that guy important. The other interesting thing I thought, his forthcoming book, Ethan's book, he said one of his first principle is try AI first on everything, and I think that rhymes with what we've been saying about Ask the Robot. I think that's good advice. All right, so here we are, big news day, developer conference, Nvidia, bigger than Italy. It's gonna probably be bigger than Germany pretty soon. And just an amazing set of new capabilities. Microsoft, it's optional in there because it's just kind of the pilot fish to the shark of the other announcements. Roblox, the capability is not that big a deal, but it's an important platform. Apple, some of us think they're caving in. Others think it's strategic genius that they're going to be a multimodal kind of organization, and the control point is going to be the phone or the device. And then for those who want the cliff notes on which AI to use, Ethan Mollick is the new cliff, and we'll give you a good, quick, useful read. All right, with that, thanks to our analysts. Any announcements, Paul? Any announcements for our audience?
Just that for folks who are coming to the April 18th MIT conference, we continue to have unbelievable speakers confirmed. Steve Case confirmed, the SVP of Intel Cloud confirmed, CEO of Perplexities confirmed. So that continues to shape up to a absolutely outstanding event. It's an in-person event. There's not a virtual option, and MIT is working right now to find some more space.
And don't forget to sign up for the daily summary newsletter. Thank you, Adam. You go to GAIinsights.com/news-1-0. So GAIinsights.com/news-1-0. And we will also have the link for the MIT conference up there as well. Thanks, everybody. I'll talk to you tomorrow.